I can still hear her voice like it happened just yesterday. "You're just a guest here. Remember that." Those words sliced through the air like a blade, sharp and deliberate. I stood there in my son's living room, holding a tray of freshly baked cookies, trying to hide the tremor in my hands. The scent of vanilla and butter filled the air, but the warmth I'd hoped to bring into that house turned cold in an instant. Rachel, my daughter-in-law, didn't even flinch after saying it. Her eyes were calm, steady, as if those words meant nothing. My son, Ethan, sat quietly on the couch, his eyes fixed on the floor. He didn't defend me, didn't even look up. I could feel the silence pressing against my chest, heavy and suffocating. I smiled weakly, pretending her words hadn't pierced me. "Of course, dear," I murmured, setting the tray on the table. "I'll keep that in mind." It was the kind of polite lie mothers tell to keep peace, even when their hearts are breaking. That house wasn't just a house to me. It was a dream, the very home my late husband Henry and I had helped our son buy. I could still remember standing beside him, picking out the paint colors, choosing the flowers for the front yard, and smiling at the thought of Ethan raising a family here. Back then, I never imagined I'd one day feel like a stranger in it. As Rachel left the room, her heels clicking sharply on the hardwood, I caught Ethan glancing my way. For a split second, guilt flickered across his face. But he said nothing, and in that silence, I felt something inside me crack. Not anger, not bitterness, just the quiet ache of realizing you've become invisible in your own child's life. That night, as I lay in the small guest room they'd prepared for me, I couldn't sleep. My husband's picture sat on the nightstand, smiling at me from another life. I whispered into the darkness, "Henry, you'd tell me to stay strong, wouldn't you?" I turned the words over in my mind again and again. A guest. That's what she saw me as. Not a mother, not a woman who had sacrificed her savings and her peace to help her son, but a guest. I thought back to the day Ethan first brought Rachel home. She was young, bright, full of charm. I remember telling Ethan, "She's beautiful, son. Just make sure she's kind." He laughed, saying, "She is, Mom. You'll love her." And for a while I did. I wanted to. When they got married, I helped plan everything. Flowers, food, decorations. I paid for part of the down payment on their first apartment. Ethan insisted he'd pay me back someday, but I told him, "You can repay me with kindness, not money." He'd hugged me then, and I'd believed that was enough. But things changed, slowly, quietly, like dust settling on furniture you forget to clean. Rachel's laughter grew colder, her tone sharper. At first, it was small things. A sigh when I offered to help, a correction when I folded laundry, a closed kitchen door when I entered the room. I told myself she was just adjusting, that new marriages were stressful. But over time, her politeness turned into something else. Contempt, maybe, or resentment. Ethan began to change too. My once talkative boy grew quiet, caught between us. He avoided long conversations and disappeared into work. I knew he felt torn, and that knowledge only made me protect him more. I didn't want to be the reason for any tension, so I stayed out of the way. But the more invisible I became, the more the house began to feel foreign. The laughter that once filled it was replaced by whispers and slammed cupboards. The air felt colder. Even the flowers in the garden I had planted seemed to wilt faster. And then came that day, the one that began with cookies and ended with humiliation. I thought it would just be another quiet afternoon. I had baked, hoping to bring a little warmth into the home, but instead I got those 6 words that shattered everything. "You're just a guest here." Still, I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I simply smiled and nodded, because I knew something Rachel didn't. Life has a way of humbling those who forget gratitude, and sometimes the truth doesn't need to be shouted. It just needs to be revealed at the right time. The next morning, fate decided to knock. Literally. When the doorbell rang, I was in the kitchen, pouring myself coffee. Rachel opened the door, her voice bright and cheerful. "Oh, Mr. Harris, what a surprise," she said. The man in the doorway smiled, holding a folder of papers. "Good morning, ma'am. I'm here to drop off the updated property documents, Mrs. Palmer's copy, as requested." Her smile faltered. She repeated slowly, "Mrs. Palmer?" "Yes," he said, looking past her toward me. "Mrs. Linda Palmer, the co-owner of this property." I turned, meeting Rachel's stunned gaze. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Her silence said everything. I just smiled and said, "Thank you, Mr. Harris. You can leave them on the table." That was the morning Rachel learned what respect really meant. Rachel stood frozen in the doorway, her hand still gripping the edge of it as though it were the only thing keeping her upright. Her perfect smile had vanished, replaced by an expression I'd never seen before. Part disbelief, part fear, part something else entirely. Ethan looked up from the couch, confusion clouding his eyes. "Co-owner?" he repeated softly, looking between me and the man with the folder. "Yes, sir," Mr. Harris replied with a professional calmness. "Mrs. Palmer's name is on the property title. She has equal ownership rights. Just needed her signature on the updated insurance documentation." The sound of the pen scratching across paper filled the room, slicing through the silence. Rachel's fingers twitched at her sides. I thanked Mr. Harris, closed the folder neatly, and walked toward the kitchen without another word. I could feel their eyes on my back. Inside, I placed the documents gently on the counter and let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. I hadn't meant for the truth to come out like this. I'd never flaunted what I'd done, never used money or ownership as leverage. But that day, the universe seemed to decide it was time for things to balance themselves. I heard footsteps behind me. It was Ethan. "Mom," he began hesitantly, "why didn't you ever tell me that you kept your name on the title?" I turned to face him. His expression wasn't angry, just lost, like a child.
I shook my head gently. She didn't need to know either until she decided I was a guest. The truth hung heavy between us. Rachel didn't join us for dinner that night. I heard her upstairs pacing, the sound of doors opening and closing, drawers slamming. When Ethan tried to talk to her, her voice rose, sharp, strained, full of anger she didn't know how to contain. I didn't need to hear the words to know what they were about. Pride, control, the humiliation of realizing she'd spoken out of place. The next morning, Rachel avoided eye contact. The clinking of cutlery and dishes filled the silence as we ate breakfast like polite strangers. Ethan tried to lighten the air. "Mom, maybe you could make that chicken pot pie tonight? You know, the one you used to make when I was a kid?" Rachel's fork paused midair. "We were going to order out tonight," she said coldly. I smiled, refusing to let the tension win. "That's fine, dear. I can cook tomorrow." But Ethan wasn't done. "Actually," he said quietly, "I'd like Mom's cooking tonight. It's been a while." Rachel's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. She just gathered her plate, turned, and disappeared into the living room. I could see the storm brewing behind her calm expression. That evening, while I cooked, Ethan came into the kitchen and helped me chop vegetables, something he hadn't done since he was a teenager. The smell of garlic and herbs filled the air, and for a brief moment, things felt normal again. But Rachel never joined us at the table. When Ethan went upstairs to call her, I overheard fragments of their conversation through the thin walls. "She made me look like a fool, Ethan," she hissed. "She didn't do anything, Rachel. You're the one who—" "Oh, don't defend her. You think she's innocent? She planned this." Her words were daggers, and each one hit its mark. But I stayed silent, stirring the soup slowly, letting her anger burn itself out. I had no desire to fight. I wasn't there to win. I was there to teach. Later that night, as I sat by the window sipping tea, Ethan came downstairs again. His shoulders sagged under the weight of something I couldn't fix. "I'm sorry, Mom," he murmured, sitting beside me. She's just shocked. She didn't mean to." I placed my hand over his. "Son, you don't need to apologize for her. Some lessons come wrapped in humility. Maybe this is hers." He nodded quietly, and for the first time in a long time, we sat together in peaceful silence. Days passed, and though Rachel kept her distance, her tone softened little by little. She no longer dismissed me with clipped phrases. Once I even caught her hesitating before asking, "Would you like some tea, Linda?" It wasn't much, but it was a start. One evening, as we sat together in the living room, she finally spoke the words I'd been waiting for. "I shouldn't have said what I did. It was rude and uncalled for." I looked at her for a long moment before responding. "Thank you, Rachel. I appreciate that." But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning of a new chapter, one where truth, pride, and gratitude would continue to wrestle quietly beneath the surface. What Rachel didn't know was that I'd recently made another decision, one that would test everything we thought we knew about family, love, and loyalty. Because sometimes, to remind people of what truly matters, life needs to shake the ground a little harder. And that shake was coming soon.
The uneasy peace in the house didn't last long. It never does when pride has been wounded and the truth lingers unspoken. For a few days, Rachel tried to act civil. Polite smiles, measured words, forced kindness. But I could feel the resentment simmering beneath her calm surface. Every time I offered to help with dinner, she'd say, "I've got it, Linda." When I folded laundry, she'd quietly refold it later. And if Ethan complimented something I did, she'd find a way to turn the moment awkward. It wasn't hatred, not exactly. It was pride, trying to regain control after being bruised. I understood that. I'd lived long enough to know that humility doesn't come naturally to everyone. It's usually learned through struggle. One evening, after Ethan left for work, I found Rachel in the kitchen, her back to me, staring out the window. The tension in her shoulders was almost visible. I hesitated, then spoke softly. "Rachel, may I have a word?" She turned slowly, her eyes tired but guarded. "Of course," she said, though her tone was anything but welcoming. I stepped closer, holding the teacup I'd been drinking from. "I want you to know I never meant to embarrass you. The property situation, I didn't plan for that moment. It just happened." She gave a faint, bitter laugh. "You didn't have to. The universe did it for you." "Rachel, I'm not your enemy. I don't want this house to feel divided. Ethan loves you, and I want peace for all of us." For a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Guilt, maybe? Then she looked down, fidgeting with her wedding ring. "You don't understand what it's like, Linda. I've worked hard to make this house feel like mine, to make it perfect. And then in 1 second, I realize I've been living in your house all along."
Her words hit me hard. I saw for the first time the fear beneath her pride. Fear of losing control, of being judged, of never feeling enough. "I understand more than you think," I said, quietly. "I was once the new wife, too. I felt small in my husband's family, out of place, constantly compared to those before me. But love, Rachel, love is the only thing that turns a house into a home, not titles, not control." She looked at me for a long time before whispering, "Maybe I've forgotten that." It was a small crack, but it was enough.
The next few days brought a fragile calm. Rachel started joining us at dinner again. She asked for recipes, listened when Ethan and I reminisced. I almost believed things might finally heal. Until one night, everything changed again. Ethan came home later than usual, his expression pale and uneasy. He barely spoke through dinner, pushing food around his plate. Rachel noticed immediately. "What's wrong?" she asked. He hesitated. "Nothing," he said too quickly. I knew that tone, the one my husband used when something was wrong but he didn't want to burden me with it. After dinner, I found Ethan outside, sitting on the porch steps, staring into the dark. I joined him silently, the night air cool against my skin. "You've got that same look you used to have when you broke a window as a kid," I said gently. He chuckled weakly. "Guess I never got better at hiding things." "What happened?" He took a deep breath. "Mom, Rachel's been hiding something. I didn't want to believe it, but..." He trailed off, running a hand through his hair. I felt my chest tighten. "What is it, Ethan?" He said finally. "She's been lying about the bills. Our mortgage payments, the taxes, I thought she was handling them. But the truth is, she's been spending money behind my back. Vacations with her friends, luxury shopping, things I never even knew about. We're months behind, Mom. If the documents you got hadn't come, I wouldn't have known at all." The words settled between us like a heavy fog. I closed my eyes, letting the pain sink in. Not anger, just disappointment. Not for myself, but for my son, who had trusted blindly. "Does she know you found out?" I asked quietly. He nodded. "We argued about it earlier today. That's why she's been so tense." Inside the house, a sound broke the silence. A sharp clatter, like glass shattering on the floor. Rachel stood in the doorway, her face pale. She had heard everything. For a moment, none of us spoke. The night seemed to hold its breath. Then she whispered, her voice trembling, "You think I wanted this? You think I meant to mess things up?" Ethan stood, his jaw tight. "Rachel, I trusted you." Tears filled her eyes, glistening under the porch light. "You trusted me because you didn't want to see me fail. You didn't want to believe I was struggling." The truth poured out of her like floodwater. She had been trying to keep up appearances, to make their life look perfect, to prove to everyone, especially me, that she could handle it all. But pride had led her into a hole she couldn't climb out of. I stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on her arm. "Rachel, pretending doesn't make you stronger. It only isolates you. You don't have to prove anything to me." She looked at me through her tears, and for the first time I saw not the cold, controlling woman I'd feared, but a frightened young woman trying desperately to hold her world together. Ethan sighed, his voice softer now. "We'll fix this, together." Rachel nodded weakly, wiping her eyes. "I'm sorry, Ethan, and I'm sorry, Linda." I smiled faintly. "Apologies are easy, dear. Change is harder, but I believe you can do both." That night, for the first time since I'd moved in, the house felt still. Not heavy, not cold, just still. Like the moment after a storm when the air clears and you can finally breathe again. Little did we know, the biggest storm hadn't even arrived yet. The morning after that confrontation, the house felt different. The silence wasn't cold anymore. It was heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. Everyone was awake early, but no one spoke much. I could hear Ethan pacing upstairs and Rachel moving around the kitchen with trembling hands. I brewed a pot of coffee and sat at the table, staring out the window at the gray sky. The world outside felt still, as if holding its breath, waiting for something to break. When Ethan finally came down, he looked exhausted. His tie hung loose, his eyes shadowed from lack of sleep. Rachel followed quietly behind him, her shoulders hunched, her confidence gone. "I called the bank this morning," Ethan said, breaking the silence. "We're behind on 3 payments. It's bad, but not irreversible." He rubbed his forehead. "We'll have to make some hard decisions." Rachel's eyes filled with tears again. "I didn't mean for it to get this far, Ethan. I wanted to handle things on my own. I thought asking for help would make me look weak." I looked up at her, my voice gentle but firm. "The strongest people aren't the ones who do everything alone, Rachel. They're the ones who know when to ask for help." She nodded, her lips trembling. "I know that now." Ethan sat beside her, his hand finding hers. "We'll figure it out together." That word, together, warmed something in me. For the first time in months, I saw a glimpse of the man Henry and I had raised. But I also knew words alone wouldn't save them. Action would. Later that afternoon, I went to my room and opened the old wooden box on my dresser. Inside were the savings bonds Henry and I had kept for emergencies. I'd always told myself I wouldn't touch them unless absolutely necessary. Maybe this was the time. Not for me, but for Ethan, for the family we'd built. As I stared at the papers, Henry's voice echoed in my memory. "Linda, sometimes helping isn't about giving. It's about guiding them to stand again." I closed the box. Not yet. They needed to learn first, to rebuild, not to rely. That evening, Ethan and Rachel sat together at the kitchen table with bills spread out like a battlefield. I stayed nearby, quietly washing dishes, pretending not to listen. Rachel sighed. "If we sell the car, that'll cover 1 payment. We could cut back on the credit cards." Ethan nodded. "And I'll take on some extra shifts at work." It wasn't much, but it was the first time they were truly working as a team. No blaming, no defensiveness, just raw honesty. Days turned into weeks, and I watched as the house slowly changed. Rachel began cooking meals again, simpler ones, but full of heart. Ethan came home earlier, helping her instead of escaping into silence. There was laughter again, quiet, fragile laughter that sounded like sunlight breaking through clouds. One evening, Rachel knocked softly on my door. "Linda, can I come in?" "Of course," I said, smiling. She stepped in, holding a folded piece of paper. "I wanted to show you something." It was a check, not large, but enough to make a difference. "I started selling some of my designs online," she said shyly. "I used to paint before life got busy. I thought maybe I could help with the bills this way." I looked up at her, surprised. "That's wonderful, Rachel. You've got real talent." She smiled faintly. "I guess I just forgot who I was for a while." There was a pause, then she spoke again, softer. "You were right, you know. Love is what makes a house a home. I've been so focused on control, on appearances, that I forgot what really matters." Her eyes glistened. "I'm sorry, Linda, for everything I said, for how I treated you. You didn't deserve that." I reached out, taking her hand. "Apology accepted, dear. Sometimes it takes a storm to remind us where our roots are." She squeezed my hand, and in that moment, I saw genuine change. Not just guilt, but growth. But peace has a way of testing us just when we think we've found it. The next week, I received a letter in the mail addressed to me. It was from the property office. At first, I assumed it was another document, but when I opened it, my heart froze. Inside was a notice, a transfer request. Rachel had tried to remove my name from the co-ownership documents weeks ago, without my consent. The paperwork hadn't gone through because of a missing signature, mine. I felt the air leave my lungs. My first instinct was anger, but it quickly gave way to something deeper. Sadness. This wasn't just about property anymore. It was about trust.
That evening, I waited until Ethan came home. Rachel was in the living room, humming softly while folding laundry. I placed the letter on the coffee table between us. Her face drained of color when she saw it. "Livda, I can explain." Ethan looked from her to me, his voice sharp. "Rachel, what is this?" Tears welled up instantly. "I did it before all this happened, before I understood. I was angry, insecure. I didn't mean to actually go through with it." Ethan's disappointment was like a knife. "You tried to take her name off our home?" Rachel covered her face, sobbing. "I was stupid. I didn't know how much she'd done for us. I was just jealous, Ethan. I felt like I was living in your mother's shadow." I took a deep breath and spoke softly. "Rachel, look at me." She hesitated, then lifted her tear-streaked face. "I'm not your enemy. I never was. But trust once broken takes time to rebuild. You'll have to earn it, not just from me, but from yourself." She nodded, crying silently. Ethan reached for her hand again, though this time it was out of forgiveness, not obligation. As I stood to leave, I paused by the door. "This house isn't mine, Rachel, and it's not yours. It's ours. The sooner we all understand that, the sooner it'll truly feel like home." Outside, the storm clouds that had been gathering all day finally broke. Rain poured down, washing the dust off the garden, the windows, the walls. Inside, we sat in silence, listening to it. 3 souls, learning, in our own ways, how to start over.
It was a quiet Sunday morning, sunlight spilling softly through the kitchen window. I was preparing breakfast when the familiar sound of the doorbell echoed through the house. That sound again, the one that had changed everything once before. My heart gave a small, anxious flutter. Ethan called out from upstairs, "Mom, can you get that?" I wiped my hands and went to the door. Standing outside was a young woman dressed neatly, holding a folder and wearing a kind smile. "Good morning, Mrs. Palmer," she said. "I'm from the Community Foundation. I believe we spoke over the phone?" I blinked, then remembered. "Oh, yes, dear. Please, come in." Rachel appeared from the living room, still in her robe, looking puzzled. Ethan followed, curious. The woman stepped inside and opened the folder. "We just wanted to confirm a few details about the scholarship fund you've established," she explained. Rachel frowned. "Scholarship fund?" I smiled softly. "Yes, the Palmer Scholarship. It's for single mothers who want to finish their education. Henry and I always dreamed of doing something like that one day. I started it quietly a few years ago." The woman nodded and continued, "We'll be announcing it publicly next week. It's been one of the largest anonymous contributions we've ever received from a private donor in this district. We wanted to thank you in person." Rachel's eyes widened. Ethan's too. "Anonymous?" he asked. I nodded. "It was never about recognition, son. It was about giving someone else the same chance I once wished I had." Rachel sat down slowly, her gaze softening as the truth settled in. I could see it dawning on her that all this time, while she had been trying to prove her worth through image and perfection, I had been quietly helping others with what little I had. The representative left a few minutes later, leaving behind a folder and a hush that filled the room. Rachel looked at me with tears in her eyes. "I judged you so wrongly," she whispered. "I thought you just wanted control. But you were helping people, and I didn't even see it." I smiled gently. "You saw what your heart was ready to see, dear. We all do." Ethan reached over and took my hand. "Mom, you've done more good than anyone I know, and I let people make you feel small in your own home. I'm sorry." I squeezed his hand, warmth flooding through me. "You've got nothing to be sorry for, Ethan. Life teaches us in strange ways. Sometimes we have to lose a little pride to gain real understanding. For the first time in months, the house felt alive again. Rachel joined me in the kitchen that afternoon, helping me prepare lunch. She was quiet but calm, her movements softer, her tone warmer. When she passed me the salt, our hands briefly brushed, and I felt something new between us. Not distance, not resentment, but a quiet respect. Over the following weeks, small changes blossomed. Rachel began volunteering with the foundation, helping organize charity events. Ethan spent more evenings at home, cooking with us, laughing again. The tension that once clung to every corner of the house slowly melted away. One evening, Rachel came to me holding a small wrapped box. She said, "This is for you," shyly. Inside was a delicate silver frame. In it, a photo of all three of us standing outside the house, our house, smiling under the spring sunlight. Beneath the photo, she'd engraved 4 simple words: "Not a guest anymore." My throat tightened. I looked up at her, tears threatening to spill. "Rachel." She shook her head gently. "No more Mrs. Palmer. Just Mom, if that's okay." For a moment, the world seemed to stand still. I reached out and hugged her, truly hugged her, the kind of embrace that heals old wounds. Ethan joined in, wrapping his arms around us both. For the first time, the family I'd dreamed of felt real again. As the sun dipped below the horizon that night, I sat by the window, sipping tea and watching the lights flicker across the neighborhood. Henry's picture still sat on the nightstand beside me, his familiar smile